Daughter, a memoir series. Volume 1. Provoked. Written and narrated by Delores Michelle Peters.
Trigger warning. Provoked contains content that may be triggering or distressing for some listeners. This series delves into sensitive topics, including religious trauma, emotional challenges, and complex family dynamics. Episodes may include discussions on abuse, emotional distress, and mental health. Please be advised that listening to this content may evoke strong emotional responses or memories. If you are sensitive to these themes or have experienced trauma, consider whether this content is suitable for you at this time. It is crucial to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. If you find that the content becomes overwhelming, we encourage you to take a break or seek support from friends, family, or mental health professionals. Your well-being is of the utmost importance. If you proceed with listening, we appreciate your understanding and acknowledge the importance of creating a safe and supportive space for all listeners. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek immediate help.
Dedication. To every daughter whose hero was also her villain. You, my sister, are not alone. I stand with you and for you. Delores. Prologue. It was all too familiar.
You know what? Fuck all y'all. Every one of you motherfuckers. Every one of you. You want to play a game with me? Come on. Let's go. Let's game up. Come on. You want to play a game? I got games for every one of you motherfuckers.
His tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen. I didn't have to see his face. The image ingrained. His eyes were squinting and black. His lips would become paper thin and tight. His face would flush with fury. His jaw would grind and pulse, and his stance would shift as if he were preparing for a physical attack. It was the voice of my father, the pastor, and it was all too familiar. He wasn't yelling. In fact, he was relatively calm. It was a cold calm that often disarmed people and weakened their defenses as his rage subtly increased. But I was completely in tune with his emotions, a skill I developed as a child, and how I survived growing up in constant fear. He gave these tantrums in doses, a toxic cocktail of verbal abuse, manipulation, and control, encapsulated by religion, which made it palatable. But anger was the active ingredient.
I want you to know I meant well to this church. I meant well to my family. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. You won't have me another hour. Not another second. Not one. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you've lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You ain't trying to help me. You join the ranks of everybody. Let's play on the pastor. Let's play on.
It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflections and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. Experts in narcissism call it narcissistic rage, intense anger, aggression, or passive aggression when a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters his or her illusions of grandiosity, entitlement, and superiority, and triggers inner inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. That comes from Preston Nye in 2018. No one could instill fear like Pastor. He was so crafty that most people were oblivious to his tactics. But this time, the mask slipped. This time, the threats of violence, the literal danger, the exploitation and psychological manipulation were directed at someone more innocent than me. Someone so undeserving of the hatred, disdain, and evil that Pastor's words were laced with. They may not have risen to the level of illegality or violated a rule, but I knew my mother, the co-pastor, was in danger. Every profane word felt like a gut punch that took my breath away. I could feel the anger boiling in the pit of my belly, the exact spot where I experienced that inexplicable attack. The section of my GI tract the surgeon removed. That's where I carry my anger. Where do you carry yours? Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Ephesians 6:4, New Living Translation.
Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your seats as Delores guides us on an exciting new journey with her bookcast series, The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked. Far from ordinary, this series dives into a deep examination of the human spirit, enriched by actual audio and video evidence. In Provoked, Delores brings to life a gripping story grounded in the scripture, Ephesians 6:4, uncovering a tale of a daughter's anger against her religious narcissist father's induced trauma. Each chapter unfolds as a deep exploration of complex father-daughter dynamics. This literary odyssey goes beyond just words, offering a multi-sensory experience. Delores shares with us not just a story, but emotions, inner conflicts, and the journey towards truth, all intensified by the tactile presence of real-life audio and video snippets. Whether you're an avid book lover or an explorer of compelling narratives, Provoked invites you into a space ripe with discovery and revelation. Come confront the shadows of the past, celebrate the human spirit's triumphs, and witness emotionally charged moments with your own eyes and ears. Join Delores, an expert storyteller, as she masterfully knots together the threads of emotion and truth. Provoked is not just a bookcast. It's a transformative narrative journey that comes alive with actual evidence. Be part of it as we unravel the chapters of resilience and the birth of empowered discerners. Welcome to The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked, the bookcast.
Welcome to The Pastor's Daughter Provoked, the bookcast. Okay, this is a book podcast, thus the word bookcast, where we're going to talk about everything that is in the book, The Pastor's Daughter Provoked. It is jam-packed, you guys, with a lot of great information. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know how much good information there was in there that could really help you to break free, right? And to heal and to really reclaim your voice, your identity, and your self-worth. And, it's been quite a journey for me, but we are going to get into it. So last week, last week, I dropped this episode. It is the prologue to the book, The Pastor's Daughter Provoked. And I don't think that I did a really good job at kind of digging into the contents that there was in that particular passage of the book, right? And so today I want us to kind of dig a little bit deeper into narcissistic rage, which is what I was highlighting in the beginning of the book. I know it's a bit shocking, right? So that's why I put out the trigger warning and all of that good stuff. And then just let you guys know that there will be some language that is used in this book. Just remember, honey, okay, first of all, I got my Invisalign, so I got a little bit of the juicy mouth, but just remember, okay, these are not my words, okay? Those are not my words. Those are my Father's words, who is a whole pastor, okay? So just keep that in mind. I know that it's a bit shocking, and I know that, sometimes people who are part of the religious community are really offended and taken aback by that type of language, and they'll quickly change the video when they hear that type of language. But I just need you to be aware. These are not my words. In fact, you can hear those words come out of my Father's own mouth. That is an actual recording that you heard in the beginning of this video. So that is an actual recording. And throughout the video series, throughout this bookcast series, you are going to hear exclusive Do you hear me? Exclusive audio, okay? So if you are someone who is kind of new to this whole narcissistic thing, especially when it comes to religious narcissism, then this is really going to give you a fly on the wall view of what it looks like to witness narcissistic rage, spiritual abuse. You can see the happenings of religious trauma, how people can end up so traumatized, from their many, and you most of the time it's many years of religious abuse and spiritual abuse. Okay. Um, and it happens on a kind of like on a continuum, right? So this behavior is something that is kind of slow cooking, if you will. So when I say slow cooking, what I mean is, like, if you are familiar with a slow cooker, then you are familiar with the process that it takes. It cooks it really slow so that it cooks to the point where it tenderizes, and it gives you time, right? So a lot of us amazing women out here, okay, sometimes we cook stuff in a crock pot and then we go on about our day because we know it's going to slow cook all day, and by the end of the day it's going to be ready for us to consume. Now, if you think about that in terms of narcissistic relationships, it's just that bad, right? You would never want anybody to look at you as something to consume, right? As something that they just put in a slow cooker and they just, they work on you over time, slow cooking you, and to the point where they have got you so tenderized, okay, that they can just take full advantage of you. And that is exactly what is kind of happening in these narcissistic relationships, which is kind of why people who are in them don't really realize that it's happening. There's an analogy that was used once where it talks about a frog, and this is horrible, right? Like, they would put a frog in some cold water, put it in a pot, and just turn the burner on low. And the frog has no idea that he's slowly cooking, right? He has no idea that this water is going to get hotter and hotter, hotter. Eventually, it's going to boil and it's going to cook you, right? But it feels good at first, because it happens so slow. It's a buildup. And before you realize it, just like the frog, before you realize it, he's in a full on boiling pot. You understand? So that's how it happens in narcissistic relationships. You don't know really that it's happening to you, especially in those beginning stages. Maybe something doesn't feel right, right? But you don't really know what it is because it's so stealth, it's so hidden, it's so sneaky that sometimes you don't realize it until it's too late. And so today we're going to talk about narcissistic rage. Now, what I want to do as we get into this bookcast and point out the different aspects of the book, I want us to actually talk about what I wrote in the book. Okay. So when you first start to read the book, it says it was all too familiar. Okay. It was all too familiar. That is how I start the bookcast. Well, the prologue. The prologue starts with, it was all too familiar. And I started it that way because there is a familiarity that comes with the rage of a narcissist. And I believe that with a lot of us women, that familiarity is what ends up causing us to get in relationships with narcissists because it is familiar. And so when I started the book with that one phrase, it was all too familiar. I know that a lot of us who have experienced narcissistic abuse could relate to that because it's like, oh man, this again, it's like, I thought we were past this. I thought, we had worked through this, or, but it's that old familiar uncomfortableness, that uneasy that sits within you, that fear that sits within you. It becomes something that sometimes it gets dormant, right? Like sometimes a religious narcissist will let up, right? They'll let up and you feel like, okay, things are much better now. And then that old familiar feeling comes back. Okay, does that make sense? So that is why I started the prologue with, it was all too familiar. Okay. And then my father, it starts off with, it goes right into dialogue where it says, you know what? Fuck all y'all. And those are my Father's words, okay? Those are my Father's words. Those are not my words, okay? And then he says, every one of you motherfuckers, every one of you. Who is he talking about? Who is he talking about here in this passage, right? That is, who is he talking about and who is he talking to? Okay, listen, who is he talking about and who is he talking to when he says, you know what? Fuck all y'all. Who is he talking to? You want to play? You want to play with me? Come on, let's go. It's game on. You want to play a game? I got games for every one of you motherfuckers. These are not my words, you guys. I'm simply repeating what was already said. So not my words. So let's go back to the question of who is he talking to and who is he talking about? Okay. Now keep in mind, this is a pastor. Okay. So keep in mind that this is a pastor. So I want you to look at everything that you are hearing from a religious lens. Okay. Because that's where everything is coming from. This is religious narcissism. Okay. So this is narcissism. All of the typical traits that you all have learned about. Okay. So I don't even really feel the need to go back into the narcissistic traits because I feel like we all know at this point. You know, I feel like kids know at this point. Okay. But what we don't really know is how religion is used to drive this manipulative and exploitative and controlling behavior of the narcissist. And what throws a lot of us off is the fact that they are using religion to do it. So that should let you know that there is a system within religion, or there is a way about the way we practice our religion that kind of enables this behavior. We're not going to talk about that right now. Okay? Not going to talk about that right now. Now, let's get into his tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest. Now, I told you guys that I am taking a certification by Mr. Vanderkolk, and he is the one who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Okay? The Body Keeps the Score. And he talks about how trauma presents itself within our bodies. So a lot of times, you know, some of us will have digestive issues, you know, we'll have headaches. We'll even have breathing issues, you guys. Okay. And I say digestive issues first because your stomach is the second brain of your body. And so a lot of times your stomach, when things are happening within your gut, that is your body's way of letting you know that things aren't right within your system. Just kind of like how your mind works, like something doesn't feel right within my system. And so a lot of times within your gut, you will carry a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, and that manifests in other ways within your body. It manifests into other things. Okay. So I've even, you know, seen where, or heard of where, right, where people are being diagnosed with cancer. And I believe that a good 85 to 90% of the preventative illnesses that we experience today can be or are rooted, right, are somehow caused by or exacerbated by toxic relationships. Does that make sense? Let me say it again. I believe that 85 to 90% of the illnesses that we are dealing with today can be prevented by removing yourself from the toxic environment, which means that is a toxic environment and your toxic relationships that are causing you to be physically sick. Let me let that sit with you for a minute. Because what a lot of us don't really bargain for, right, is for our relationships with people to make us sick. But that is what is happening. And so when I said here in the book that his tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen, that is me letting you know that the abuse that I have experienced, the familiarity of the abuse that I experienced sent a shock through my system, something that I could feel in real time as I heard it, and something that still shocks me every time I hear the recording back. So when I play this, I can almost put myself in the room where this took place, which should let you know, right? I wasn't in the room. My father was not talking to me. But we're going to get into that, okay? And so I give you an image of how a person would look, okay? And how I knew my father looked. Just hearing the recording. I didn't even have to see his face, y'all. I didn't have to see his face. I already knew what he looked like because it was familiar to me, which means that it happened so frequently and it was so traumatizing that it left a etch in my mind, in my body, in my spirit. I could visualize how my father looked in that moment where he was saying what he was saying. I could visualize it. And I could feel it. Does that make sense? And so I explained here exactly how I knew he'd look. I knew that his face would be really tight, right? I knew that his eyes would turn black. Some of us have experienced that. We've seen this in real time, right? A person with normal looking eyes by any other standards, right? But when that rage hit, that person's eyes changed. And it began to be a familiar feeling, a familiar look. I knew that his body was shifting. I could tell that the anger was even causing a physical reaction within him. And that it was only a matter of time before there was physical action to back up the verbal threats. It was the voice of my father, y'all. The pastor. And it was all too familiar. And what you'll notice as you listen to the recording is that his voice was calm. There is a calmness about someone who has done so much manipulative work to you, right? That has so much control over you that familiar feeling, even it prompts you to become compliant, right? To be subjected to get under the control, right? To act right. It provokes you, okay? To act right and to do what, and I say act right, meaning according to what the narcissist deems to be acting right, right? To do what they want you to do. Because that familiar feeling, because you know that it's going to get worse. It's familiar to you. So that person doesn't even have to raise their voice at that point because they have already done the slow cooking. They've already done the slow cooking. And you remember what it was like for the heat to get a lot hotter. And you don't want that. You know what that narcissistic rage feels like. You know what it sounds like. You know what it does to your body. You know you don't want to eat. It makes you physically sick. Your stomach turns. You're in knots. You're shaking. Because you know what's coming. But there are tactics to a religious narcissist. Tactics that are so subtle that people around don't know what is happening. They don't know what's happening until it's too late. Here's what he said. I want you to know that I meant well. I meant well to this church, and I meant well to this family. Y'all don't deserve me, and you won't get me another hour. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You ain't trying to help this church get nowhere. You joined the ranks of everybody, playing on the pastor like he's weak. Let me let that sit. Let me let you sit with that for a moment. And I'm going to get this article. Now grab this article, and it talks about ambient abuse. Okay. Ambient abuse is also known as gaslighting. Now, there's an article written by Sam Vaknin that he is a diagnosed narcissist. Okay. But he speaks about narcissism, really letting us know the ins and outs of narcissism. Okay. And this is what he says about ambient abuse. This is the definition that he provided. Ambient abuse is the stealth, subtle, underground currents of maltreatment that sometimes go unnoticed, even by the victims themselves, until it's too late. Ambient abuse penetrates and permeates everything. It is difficult to pinpoint and identify. It is ambiguous, atmospheric, diffuse, hence its insidious and pernicious effects. It is by far the most dangerous kind of abuse there is. Let me repeat that. It is by far the most dangerous kind of abuse there is. And Sam Vaknin was not talking about religious or spiritual ambient abuse, which is what you heard. So let me ask you this. If ambient abuse in the secular sense, right, in the worldly sense, is the most, by far, he says, it is by far the most dangerous kind of abuse there is, then how much worse do you suppose it is, ambient abuse is, right, when you use religion to do it? This is what he says. It is the outcome of fear. Fear of violence, fear of the unknown, fear of the unpredictable, the capricious, the arbitrary. It is perpetrated by dropping subtle hints. Subtle hints like, I want you to know I meant well. Subtle hints like that. It'll look like you won, but you lost. It looks like that. Y'all don't deserve me another hour, and you won't get me another hour. Fuck you. Fuck you. That is what it looks like. It is perpetrated by dropping subtle hints. I'm continuing to read here. By disorienting, by constant and unnecessary lying, by persistent doubting and demeaning, and by inspiring an air of unmitigated gloom and doom. Let me repeat that again, okay? Because I need to repeat this so that I get across to you just how dangerous this kind of abuse is. Okay? It is the outcome of fear. Now, what does the Bible tell us about fear? Put it in the chat. What does the Bible tell us about fear? So you tell me how a pastor, and I'm saying a pastor only because I'm speaking about my father in this particular situation. But make no mistake. This is happening in a lot of relationships by people who are not pastors. But I'm trying to get across to you that if this is happening, and it is by far the most dangerous kind of abuse there is, according to Sam Wagner, who is a narcissist, self-proclaimed and diagnosed, then how much worse is it for a pastor to be doing that behind the pulpit? Now, let me go back, okay? Because I don't want you guys to think that this was said behind the pulpit. This wasn't said. I mean, I know I made it look like that, okay? Because to me, in your capacity as a pastor, as a man of God, you don't take that hat off. Like, either you're a man of God or you're not. There's no, well, I'm a man of God on Sunday while I'm preaching this here sermon. And maybe on Wednesdays when there's Bible study going on, but every other day of the week when I'm behind closed doors with my family, the ones who love me most, then I'm not a pastor no more. I don't think that's how that works. So what does the Bible say about fear? Put it in the chat, y'all. Come on, I know I got some Bible scholars around these parts. Ambient abuse is the outcome of fear of violence, fear of the unknown, fear of the unpredictable. You know, like where he said, fuck you, y'all lost. Y'all don't deserve me. Y'all won't give me another hour. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And that is where you get into the part where he says, it is perpetrated by dropping subtle hints. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't give me another hour. It'll look like you won, but you lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You join the ranks of everybody. Does it sound like that maybe? By disorienting, by constant and unnecessary lying, by persistent doubting and demeaning, you join the ranks of everybody playing on a pastor. And by inspiring an air of unmitigated gloom and doom, I'll show you how weak I am. What does that mean? And if someone is saying that to you, then are you not wondering in your mind, what does that even mean? Let's say a stranger says that to you, right? Which a stranger wouldn't, which is why ambient abuse doesn't happen in relationships that don't have time, that don't have that closeness and that impact to make that type of abuse happen, to make that type of relationship where it can happen so slowly and so stealthily and so subtly that you don't know it's happening to you. Where a person can calmly say to you, you don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. Oh, it'll look like you won, but you lost. Maybe by a stranger, it doesn't really sound like much, right? There's no familiarity there. But when a person has already abused you, they've already shown you what they are capable of, then these words are doing the work that they are intended to do. Here's what I said. It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflection and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. It doesn't always look like what you see on the screen. Sometimes it's calm. It's subtle. Even to the point where a person changes how they say it, so it doesn't sound like a threat, right? In the way they delivered it. but you know it's a threat in the way they delivered it. Do you see what I'm saying? So, when a narcissist experiences narcissistic rage, let's talk about narcissistic rage. What is that? Intense anger, aggression, even passive aggression. When a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters what they believe about themselves. It's their own sense of entitlement, their own illusions of grandiosity, their own sense of superiority. And what it does is it triggers something within them. And what does it trigger? It triggers the truth. Okay? That's what it triggers. It triggers the truth about who the person really is. You're not as grand as you think you are. You're not as superior as you think you are. And you're not entitled to my undying loyalty, regardless of how sick I have become being under your leadership, being your daughter. Are y'all following me here? And I promise you that there are a lot of us who are experiencing this right now. Right now, as we sit here and speak on this live. And that is so subtle and so stealth and so sneaky that we don't even know that we are being abused. But our body knows. Our body is not fooled by this. Our body knows. My body knew as soon as I heard those words, as soon as I heard the voice, it was a palpable feeling. It was in my gut. I knew. Do y'all understand? I knew. I knew because it was familiar to me. Here's what I say. No one could instill fear like Pastor. Now, why is that? Because we are unsuspecting of certain people doing certain things. We don't want to believe that these things are happening, despite seeing them repeatedly. There has never been a time in history where we have seen so much of spiritual leaders and even fathers just completely doing the most worst. Right? Just doing the most worst. And we are seeing that so much. And not that this is a new thing. The only reason we're seeing it so much is because of social media, thank God. Because if we are actually seeing these things on our social media streets, right? And I'm writing a whole book about it, but there is still so much doubt that these things are taking place. And then there's so much doubt that there needs to be systematic change so that these things don't happen as often. That we're not seeing every day where another spiritual leader has done something demonic, where another father has abused, abandoned, and mistreated his own children. And some of them don't abandon. They stick around and abuse. That's what mine did. He touts that he never left. Oh, I never left, you know? A lot of men do walk away. But is it that much better that you stayed, but you still abused? And can I acknowledge the fact that you were present, but still acknowledge the fact that you abused? We have gotten to the point, you guys, where if something doesn't meet the criteria of a law that is done in the secular world, right? If it doesn't if it doesn't meet that test, right? Which those laws change all the time. Think about how the age limit has changed on the age of consent. We know that when the world decides that it wants to do something demonic, all it's going to do is change its rules. But what doesn't change is what's in the Bible. Well, at least it shouldn't change, but we know people be manipulating that too, child. Okay? So we use our discernment. We use our discernment heavily when it comes to reading the Bible. But at least we know that there is some standard that we can adhere to within our faith communities. So let's get into the questions that I asked in the beginning, right? The questions that I knew you would want to know. Who was he talking to? And who was he talking about? Who was he talking to? And who was he talking about? Let's go to the recording and see.
Verbal abuse, manipulation, and control. His face and through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen. I didn't have to see his face. The image ingrained. His eyes were squinting and black. His lips would become paper thin and tight. His face would flush with fury. His jaw would grind and pulse, and his stance would shift as if he were preparing for a physical attack. It was the voice of my father, the pastor, and it was all too familiar. He wasn't yelling. In fact, he was relatively calm. It was a cold calm that often disarmed people and weakened their defenses as his rage subtly increased. But I was completely in tune with his emotions, a skill I developed as a child, and how I survived growing up in constant fear. He gave these tantrums in doses, a toxic cocktail of verbal abuse, manipulation, and control, encapsulated by religion, which made it palatable. But anger was the active ingredient.
I want you to know I meant well to this church. I meant well to my family. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. You won't have me another hour. Not another second. Not one. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you're lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You ain't trying to help me. You join the ranks of everybody. Let's play on the pastor. Let's play on.
It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflections and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. Experts in narcissism call it narcissistic rage, intense anger, aggression, or passive aggression. When a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters his or her illusions of grandiosity, entitlement, and superiority, and triggers inner inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. That comes from Preston Nye in 2018. No one could instill fear like Pastor. He was so crafty that most people were oblivious to his tactics. But this time, the mask slipped. This time, the threats of violence, the literal danger, the exploitation and psychological manipulation were directed at someone more innocent than me. Someone so undeserving of the hatred, disdain, and evil that Pastor's words were laced with. They may not have risen to the level of illegality or violated a rule, but I knew my mother, the co-pastor, was in danger. Every profane word.
My mother, the co-pastor. That's my parents right there on the screen, you guys. This recording, to answer your questions in the beginning, okay, because I know those were your questions. My father was talking to my mother. The pastor was talking to the co-pastor. I just want to let that sink in because, it sinks in every single time for me, They say that there's a thing called femicide, where women are being unalived at a rate of every 4.5 hours. And it's like the time lessens and lessens and lessens as time passes. And every time I listen to this recording or I read, this passage of the book, I think about my mother and how she could have been one of those numbers, one of those femicide numbers, at the hands of my very own father, a pastor. And I think there is a lot of me, even growing up, seeing the different sides of my father. There is a side of me that didn't want to believe that this could happen from a man who professes to be a man of God. But the reality that a lot of us, not just my mother, are dealing with this type of abuse. But it's much more complicated when you are in a position of spiritual leadership. Let me ask you this, right? And I wasn't even going to go here, but let me ask you this. What was my mother supposed to do? Really? And what is she supposed to do in the position that she was in? Being the wife of a religious narcissist. Being a co-pastor to that very same religious narcissist. Where is her refuge? Where was her place of safety, of security, sanity? And as I wrote this book, The Pastor's Daughter Provoked, I began to, not initially, right? Because there was a lot of my childhood trauma that I took issue with my mother about, And so we've had to work through and to talk and, we've had to do all those things in order to get to the place where we are now. But at a certain point in the process, I began to look at my mother as a daughter, not my daughter, but somebody's daughter, right? I don't know if you guys saw the shirt that I was wearing today. It says, handle me with care. Handle with care because, I am somebody's daughter. It doesn't say all that. It says, handle with care. I am somebody's daughter. And I created this shirt and that line because that's how serious it is. I think about my mother as somebody's daughter, as Joan's daughter, as Job's daughter. Those are her parents' names. And then I think, what would they say if they were still here and they knew that my father was trying to kill my mother? It was trying to kill their daughter. And I began to look at her in that sense of, we are all daughters. And even when we grow up as women and we have our own children, we have our own daughters, we are still somebody's daughter. And I think that there is a dehumanization of women that is taking place, a dehumanization and an objectification, to where this type of treatment can go on and we still elevate the abuser. And what we find in these situations is that the typical abuser is a man. No one elevates women abusers. They just don't. It just doesn't happen. We elevate the men. And I'm not trying to get into any type of gender stuff because I really don't even believe it's gender-based. I think it's all spiritual, Everything is spiritual. So it really just comes down to demonic influence. But even if we're looking at it like that, right? And just like I said, I looked at my mother as someone's daughter. Is she not God's child? Is she not God's daughter? Am I not God's daughter? Are you not God's daughter? And I will not allow my mother, me, or any other daughter to be dehumanized and objectified to the point. Because it's gotten to this point, y'all. It's gotten to the point where there's not even an ounce of empathy, compassion, remorse. Nothing. Because we simply don't care. We simply don't care about our daughters. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? And this is heavy, right? It's heavy. And I wanted to make sure I did a little more due diligence when it comes to highlighting the aspects of this book, of the beginning of the book, that I really wanted to put you guys there. Put you in my shoes as a daughter who is listening to this dynamic between her own parents, who are both pastors. You see what I'm saying? So I have to really point out those positions, because you have to realize how impactful that must be for me. There is no refuge when the person who is abusing you is both your parent and your pastor. When people are having problems with their parent, they'll go to their pastor and talk about it. Who did I have to go to? Who? Who did my mother have to go to? When the very man who she was sleeping with and who she was serving with was abusing her. I'm not just provoked because of the abuse that I experienced. And I'm not even just provoked about the abuse my mom experienced. I'm provoked by the abuse that we are all experiencing as daughters. Even the ones of us who don't even know that we are being abused or we have been abused, and that we are still carrying that trauma. We are still carrying the devastation of what is happening. We are carrying it into every other relationship we have. Every other relationship. You might be suffering on your job. You don't get along with your coworkers. Why? Why are you nasty? Why are you angry? Why are you sick? You have to ask those questions and then begin to look around you at the people you have in your life and assess the toxicity level. Assess the toxicity level of the people you have in your life. And sometimes you got to look at your parents. Sometimes you got to look at your pastor. Okay? those relationships and those positions that you don't want, like they just ought not be, right? No one expects this from their parent. No one expects this from their pastor. You just don't expect it. And even when you realize that it's happening, you don't want to accept it. You just don't. I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to accept that my father was really trying to kill my mom. And then put it on God like it's some type of higher calling that you're trying to get to. And all of these people who God has put in your life are the ones who are stopping you from this great purpose that God has given you. What, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But why does this work? Why do these tactics work? Why are we still upholding these demons? Well, we know good and well that it ain't right. So we talk about narcissistic rage. And that's what this was about. You know what? It wasn't even about that. We know what we're dealing with. We know that we live in a world where the demonic influence is appearing to be a whole lot stronger than the light that we see around us. But I truly believe that as daughters, right, that we can stand up. I was one of the ones. There were other daughters that helped my mother to escape this terrible situation that she was in, where her life was almost taken from her by the very man that she gave 4 children to. By the very man that she served. She served with. Do you understand? The job of a pastor? The calling, the weighing of other people's souls on you, the responsibility. But there is also an accountability that comes with such a position. And that is where we are missing the mark. Because if the church, if families, and many other industries have become so unsafe that our own daughters have to get the hell away from it, then we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do. But it's going to take us as daughters to do it. It's going to take us to do it. And so when we come back, I am going to talk about the daughter plight, the responsibility of a daughter. And I think I'm just the one to do it because I realized through this process that I have impact as a daughter. Now, my father appears to be an unchanged man, I have no relationship with him. I don't speak to him. I haven't in many years now. But I speak to the daughter who is in that position where she's trying to find the strength to cut her family off, the toxicity, right? She's trying to cut the toxicity off, not necessarily family. I don't mean it that way, but I mean she's trying to cut the toxic pieces out of her life, the toxic influences and all of those things. And I directly speak to that daughter because it's not easy to cut your parent off. It's not. And especially when you acknowledge that there are good sides, there are good qualities to my father. There are. okay, but sometimes we have to do what is necessary for our own sanity, for our own health, for our own relationship with God, with our Creator. Sometimes we have to do what is necessary. And sometimes it's necessary to cut ties. So if if that resonates with you and you are, someone who is breaking free and recovering from narcissistic abuse, religious trauma, spiritual abuse, then I want you to reach out to me. I want you to contact me, to reply to this video, to share the video, to subscribe, like do all the things, to really build this community. I want to connect with you. I want you to be a part of this community because we need to stand strong as daughters. And I promise you, I'm standing with you. I'm right here. I'm standing with you. Okay. So like the video, share the video, do all the things. And also I put in the description box how you can get my book, The Pastor's Daughter Provoked. It's available. The best way right now is to get it on Amazon. I am working on creating a I guess you could call it a book box, right? That's going to include the book, a steno journal, and the fan, you guys. Okay, everybody loves the fan. So I want to make that available to those who want to be a part of the bookcast. Now, I'm just now getting the bookcast started, and I am a one-woman show, so it takes me a lot longer to do things. And I'm, a little sickly. You guys know I have fibromyalgia and lupus, so I have to manage my health. So it takes me a little bit longer to get things done, but I have a heart for what I'm doing. I have a calling, I have a purpose, and I know what that is. And so I'm going to do what I need to do to make that happen. Now, what I need you guys to do, you girls, okay, daughters, to roll up your sleeves. If God is leading you to help to build this community of daughters, then please reach out to me and let me know. I need you, I need you. I need all of you. Because we are going to be stronger together. The Bible says one shall chase 1,000. Okay. So I'm expecting 1,000 of y'all, okay, at least 1,000, to just come from me saying something. And then I want another one of y'all to say something. So then we can do some of that Bible math, okay? Because that Bible math gives, okay? One shall chase 1,000, 10,000. What? Child, that's Bible math for you. Okay, that math be mathing. Okay, so in the description, you'll see how you can get my book from Amazon, how you can keep in contact with me, like and share the video. I pray that you guys are blessed by the content, and that you feel more enriched and more empowered as a daughter to really step into your divine purpose as a daughter and create the change that we want to see in this world. Okay. I love you guys. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I love y'all. Bye-bye for now.